Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to Healing Outside the Box. My name is Jean Tiberio, and I'm a nutritionist and a wellness coach. You're listening to episode 161, and I'm calling it Possible Alternative Treatments for Alzheimer's Disease, Part 4. This is the final part in this Alzheimer's series, and yes, I know, it's not the funniest of subjects, but I hope you've learned something, because I certainly have. One of the things that I've learned is that even if you have the defective gene that may give you a higher risk of getting Alzheimer's, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll actually get the disease. And yes, lifestyle factors can alter how that gene gets expressed. Another thing I've learned is that if you practice healthy living behaviors, there's still a pretty slim chance that you'll get the disease. What are healthy living behaviors? Oh, don't make me come to your house and tell you what they are. We can turn this car around right now. Actually, I don't have to come to your house because there are many episodes in the archives that are related to this exact subject. I'll try to remember to make a list of links and put them in the show notes. I've also touched on many of the details in my previous 3 episodes, and I encourage you to listen to them at your convenience, if you so choose, that is. Today I'm going to talk about non-food behaviors that help lower your risk of getting Alzheimer's disease. But first, since yesterday was Super Bowl Sunday, and I live in Massachusetts, and the New England Patriots are once again playing, well, some other team, I should probably discuss for 2 minutes why I'm not terribly depressed that they lost, and why Tom Brady cheated once again. Now, I generally turn on the Super Bowl station just before the halftime show, and then turn off the station after the halftime show, i.e., not really a football fan. I did enjoy watching Justin Timberlake, who clearly inherited the cool as a cucumber gene. Speaking of inherited genes, since it seemed like an interesting game, and I had nothing better to do, I continued watching, and I saw a rather rare occurrence. I saw Tom Brady get sacked, and his mangled body went in one direction, while his pushed-in head went in another direction. The NFL is clearly not getting the Nunes memo about how concussions are linked to a much greater risk of getting Alzheimer's disease. But, as always, adults have the right to personal choice, and these episodes are not as much about you have to do this or you can't do that, as much as they are about educating people to make changes as they so choose. And, once again, and I know I've brought this up before, but it bears repeating, Tom Brady is cheating with his running game, and nobody seems to be noticing. My God, he's married to a gazelle. How can that be legal? He's chasing his wife around the house, trying to get some tail, darting this way, zigzagging that way, while his gazelle evades the tackle, leaping over child protective gates between rooms. One of these days someone's going to notice, and they'll have to go out and get every player his own gazelle. But back to the podcast. Here's a list of non-food activities that you might want to consider that could reduce your risk of getting Alzheimer's. These are in no particular order. Number 1, exercise. I know, you were afraid I would say that. I've read in a couple of different places that regular physical exercise can lower your risk of Alzheimer's disease by up to 50%. And that's a lot, my friends. In one study down in Japan, or across in Japan, they measured mental function in those people with normal mental function, I guess, in those with mild cognitive impairment due to Alzheimer's. They gave them moderate-level exercises. After 1 year, 70% of the study participants showed significantly increased memory. Now this is with physical exercise, not mental exercises. I know there are various descriptions of what's called moderate exercise, but the ballpark definition might be 30 minutes of aerobic activity 3 to 5 times per week. And it can be walking. It doesn't need to be jumping jacks or Zumba or jazzercise. I've read different theories as to why this is the case, but there may be both direct and indirect reasons. Exercise obviously decreases your risk of diabetes and heart disease, and those are two risk factors for Alzheimer's disease. But there may be other reasons as well. In a real-life scenario, it's more likely that regular exercisers also pay attention to what they are eating and may not be smokers. So yes, it is hard to isolate one risk factor when it comes to real life. But as Dr. Mark Hyman has said, and I believe I mentioned this in one of the previous episodes, does it really matter? Because in the end, we have a lower risk of getting dementia. Period. Mic drop. It has been suggested that exercise helps the metabolism of one or more proteins in the brain, and maybe because of this, there is a slower formation of those amyloid plaques that are the nasty little buggers causing symptoms. I have also seen an article saying that exercise, I imagine especially in young people, leads to a healthier hippocampus. Now, the hippocampus, as you recall, is the organ inside the brain that's responsible for memory. So it's a good thing, as Martha Stewart would say. Number 2, challenge your mind daily. It's no accident that people who do a lot of reading seem to have a lot of dem-dash smarts. So keep reading, and you too can become the greatest, most stable genius ever, ever, ever. I seem to remember mentioning that playing cards like poker or blackjack helps to reduce your risk of getting Alzheimer's. And the bonus is that you'll be having fun or losing your house. And if that's the case, refer to my episode on addiction. There seems to be a linear relationship between the number of years of formal education and the chance of avoiding Alzheimer's disease. Or is it a direct relationship? I just don't know. I guess the theory is that the more you practice memorizing things, the better you get at memorizing. So it's not so much formal education as it is interest in learning new things. And the more interest you have in learning, the more neural connections you'll have in your brain, and therefore the longer it will take to notice the loss of those neural connections in terms of real life forgetting where you put your keys. Or like poor Senator Orrin Hatch, who seemed to be looking for his glasses when they were on his face. There must be a video of that somewhere. So the brain works like regular muscles that way. If you're interested in memory games, there's a few sites on the internet you could try out. There's some free memory games, and I'll give you a link to one in the show notes. Some of them are like that game, Concentration, where you have to match the squares. And there are maze games where you try to find the lowest amount of steps to the finish line. There are also paid sites like Luminosity. Here you can track your own progress with these games. I tried Luminosity for a year, and I found that there were a few good games to help with memory, both names and numbers. There was one trying to track goldfish swimming around in a fishbowl, and that just plain pissed me off. Number 3, acupuncture. Now, as we all know, acupuncture is an alternative medicine that is believed to promote self-healing. Acupuncturists use fine sterile needles that are placed in very specific parts of the body. This therapy is thought to stimulate the body and improve the flow of energy. Now, in some studies, acupuncture seemed to improve the mood and cognitive function of people who already had Alzheimer's disease, but more research is still needed. There is little risk with acupuncture done by a trained and licensed practitioner, so it may be worth trying for other health benefits. The bottom line here is that it probably doesn't improve symptoms significantly, but there is no harm done. And if it relaxes you, so much the better. If you're terrified of needles, probably not worth the trip. Number 4, aromatherapy. Now this uses essential oils to enhance well-being. A short-term study was done testing aromatherapy on a group of older adults. Some had AD and some did not. At the end of the study, every person showed improvements in their thinking ability. But this was a short-term study with a small number of subjects. This reminds me of a nutrition study that I was involved in with Park Davis. They were examining the effects of a new cholesterol-lowering drug called Lopid. They wanted to run 8 weeks of the study with diet alone and then split the participants into drug or placebo. After 4 weeks, everyone in the study improved their cholesterol levels and lost weight, which made Park Davis very sad because it showed that diet alone is very effective when you have the TLC factor. All of the people in the study were getting the TLC in a one-on-one individual care setting. The nurse and I encouraged them, complimented them, exchanged jokes, and generally got to know each person. And lo and behold, their cholesterol levels dropped. I think the above rule applies with aromatherapy, and perhaps something like Reiki therapy. So probably not an effective treatment, but there is no harm done, and if you find these aromatherapy oils soothing, then have at it. The essential oils used in the study included rosemary, lemon, lavender, and orange. They concluded the study saying that larger studies still need to be conducted over longer periods of time. By the way, if you want to try the aromatherapy at home, dilute the oils that you buy in a base oil like olive oil or almond oil before applying to the skin. Number 5. Bright light therapy. As most of us know, Alzheimer's disease eventually affects the part of the brain that regulates the circadian rhythm. This tells the body when to sleep and when to wake up. AD can cause a disruption in your sleep and wake cycle. Some patients have problems sleeping, which increases the risk of nighttime wandering. A few studies have found that bright light therapy may help. If you want to experiment with this for a family member, make sure you go to a reputable person for this type of therapy. I'll give you a link to the NIH article in the show notes. Number 6. Herbal medicine. Now, herbal medicine is obviously a huge field, and I can't give this the attention it deserves in this brief podcast episode. I'll just say this. In general, some herbs may be effective in treating Alzheimer's disease to some extent if they have anti-inflammatory or antioxidant properties. If you have a favorite herb and you're curious about it, you can always Google the herb with the question, does it have anti-inflammatory or does it have antioxidant properties? Now, in the herb category, I just want to briefly bring up ginkgo biloba in an herb mixture called chotasan. First, ginkgo biloba. It sounds like, from the name alone, that this would be a big hit with the Alzheimer's prevention crowd. But it's actually a miss. Study after study found that ginkgo biloba had no effect on people with mild or moderate Alzheimer's disease. More research is ongoing, but the results thus far don't look promising. By the way, be sure to report any use of herbs or alternative approaches to your doctor. Ginkgo biloba is known to be a blood thinner, and this could be hazardous for people already on blood thinners. Now, let's talk about an herbal mixture called chotasan. There are a couple of research studies in the NIH literature on this one. I'll give you a link to one of them in the show notes. Reading through a couple of these studies actually made me want to go out and buy the stuff. In one placebo-controlled study, they gave the test group 7.5 grams of this herbal extract per day. I have no idea what the placebo group was getting. Don't want to think about that. So they tested them for a bunch of different psychiatric and social activities. and found significant improvements in the group taking the concoction of 11 different herbs. The scientists didn't want to place any bets on why this herbal mixture was working, but more studies are being done to look into it. One theory is that one of these herbs is thought to increase the number of nerve cells or neurons. So I guess what I mentioned before applies here. If you start out with many more neurons, even with loss over the years, the loss will be noted at a much older age if you have more neurons to start with. Number 7. Adequate sleep. There seems to be some common sense behind this recommendation, I imagine. We all know how we feel when we don't get enough sleep. Now, I don't know the sciencey things about sleep deprivation, but I'm willing to bet that your stress hormone, cortisol, will increase when you're sleep deprived. And we've all been there. We are grumpier, less eager to learn new things, more likely to eat junk food. And speaking of food, I know this is a non-food episode, but I can't help myself. I mentioned in a previous episode that the leakier your gut is from taking in all that Roundup you're consuming, the more substances will leak into your bloodstream and straight up into your brain. And you don't want no stuff in your brain that don't belong there. Number 8, meditation. There are so many studies done on meditation's effect on the brain that I can't get into specific ones here. Suffice it to say that meditation is a good thing, a very good thing. I've got 3 or 4 episodes on the effect of meditation on the brain, and if I can remember where they are, I'll go looking for them. Number 9, positive thinking. I suppose this relates to number 8, the meditation thing. Again, a very good thing. There's a whole new field called positive psychology that's really gaining traction. I see it as a hands-on approach to looking on the bright side. A positive psychology therapist or a wellness coach might say to you, "So, what's going well? What's important to you? What things have you tried in the past that worked for you?" Now, this doesn't mean that you have to be annoyingly perky, and you can certainly keep your positivity to yourself, your choice. But positive energy will help decrease cortisol levels and increase your willingness and desire to make positive change. Now, if you want some positive energy and don't know how to reach out to a health and wellness coach, today is your lucky day. That is because I just happen to be one. I know I sound like a used car salesman, but in my opinion, health and wellness coaching from me or anyone else is a win-win situation for both the client and the coach. But it's the client that's in the driver's seat and steering the car. If you're interested in learning more about health and wellness coaching, you can email me on my contact page, which is healingoutsidethebox.com/contact, and I'll also give you a link in the show notes. Well, that's all I have for you today. Be well and stay tuned next week for another episode of Healing Outside the Box.